So, welcome to episode 2 of Put Some Respect on Your Relationship. Today, we're going to be talking about definitions. So, just wanted to give you guys some background because we're going to be talking about a couple things some stuff that you guys might not have heard before, right? So, I want to make sure that as we're going over this and I'm talking about stuff that you guys understand what I'm talking about, right? So, one of the things that I think it's super important in relationships is that everyone's kind of speaking the same language, right? So that when you are saying something, your partner understands what you're saying, right? Because sometimes we'll say things and they have multiple meanings, or someone will interpret it a different way. So that's why I wanted to kind of go over some definitions. So the first one, what do I mean when I say relationship, right? We're talking about healthy relationships. Now, some of you might think, a relationship only applies to somebody you're exclusive with. Working with kiddos, I'll hear people say like, oh, well, like we never said we were going to be exclusive, or we're not even dating. But all of the behaviors that kind of go along with that are dating behaviors, right? So when I say relationship, I mean all relationships, right? You have relationships with your parents, you have relationships with your friends, with your cousins, with coworkers, with peers, with teachers, like any interaction that you're really having on a consistent basis with another human being is a relationship. When I say a dating partner, then I specifically mean someone that you are in an intimate relationship with, right? So you and that person are going out, whether that is exclusive or not exclusive, or whether you think you guys are going out and the other person thinks you're not going out, right? All of those are kind of under this relationship umbrella. And I'm going to challenge you guys that when I talk about relationships to see how these things apply to different relationships in your lives. So when I talk about stuff, some of it, you might think, hey, you know what, that really applies to my relationship with my friends more than it does my relationship with my partner. Or, that really applies to my relationship with my mom more than it applies to my relationship with my partner. So all of the things that we talk about, it's not specific to a boyfriend or girlfriend or a dating partner, right? So with that being said, also I'm going to challenge you guys that any person that you decide you're going to flirt with or, say comments to or try to engage with in an intimate way, you should be applying the same respect to them. I have heard, from various youth I work with and also friends in my friend circle, where when they are engaging with someone, whether they're just talking to them, they just started talking to them, whether they're talking to them online, whether they're just liking pictures and back and forth, that then for some reason that person doesn't matter, right? They can say things to them or do things or act in a way that they very clearly would not do if they were exclusive with that person or trying to build a relationship with. So the other thing I'm going to challenge you guys to do is to really see all of those people as someone you're in a relationship with, right? And to treat them with the same respect and have kind of the same expectations of them and expectations of you in those relationships that you would if it was something more serious. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So unhealthy, right? I'm going to talk about what's healthy, I'm going to talk about what's unhealthy, and then I'm going to talk about what's abusive. So where's the difference between unhealthy and abusive, right? One of the next episodes that we're going to have talks about relationships on the spectrum, right? Not everybody has a healthy relationship all the time, but not everybody's relationship is unhealthy all the time either. There's fluctuation in these relationships. So really the difference between unhealthy behaviors, which are behaviors that So unhealthy behaviors are behaviors that are usually used to manipulate or control your partner. And this can be something that you're aware of, but it can also be something you're not aware of, right? These are behaviors that we do to get our way, regardless of whether or not it's good for our partners or good for us. So we'll talk about, really define unhealthy relationships later on. But the difference between an unhealthy and abusive behaviors is really severity and intention. So let's say that one of the unhealthy behaviors you have going on in your relationship is that your partner constantly checks up on you, right? Anytime you go out, they're texting you. If you're out longer than you said you were going to be out, then they want to go through your phone, do things like that. So that's unhealthy, obviously. But when let's say that happens 1 or 2 times, and you say to your partner, you know what, I don't appreciate this. This is how you doing that makes me feel. Like, it doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't makes me feel like you can't trust me. And maybe I don't want to continue this relationship anymore. And then your partner comes back and says, you know what, you're right. I'm being really insecure. Or you guys are able to have a conversation about it, and then the behavior changes. It stays in the unhealthy category, right? Because there are times that people can change. Sometimes people don't know the effects that they're having, or this is the behavior that they know and they don't know it's unhealthy. And we're going to talk about that too. So that's where it stays in unhealthy. When it turns into abusive, right, is when, let's say this happens, you have the conversation with your partner, say, you know, I really don't appreciate that. I feel like I can't trust you, or that I feel like this means you can't trust me. Or I feel like this is putting distance between us. And your partner comes back and says, well, I can't trust you. Or I know that you did this. Or you went out with this person, I told you not to. And then you find out that now every time you've gone out with your friends, they've tracked you, right? They've figured out which restaurant you were at or what movie you went to go see. They started showing up there. And then you started to be afraid and thought, you know what, maybe it's not a good idea if I go out with my friends. Or maybe it's really not a good idea if I hang out with that kid from my class who asked me to go out. Because you're afraid of your partner showing up, or your partner making a scene, or your partner getting physical. That's where we go into abusive, because at that point you've changed what your decisions or what you would normally do around this other person's behavior. So although you want to spend time with that peer from class and you want to go out with your friends, you're not doing that because you're afraid of that other person's behavior. So that's where we go into the abusive part. That's kind of where it starts to cross the line, right? And I'm going to make the argument that anytime anyone uses physical aggression or physical violence to get their way, that's abusive. Because people know better. Like, don't think people don't know better. People know better. So at that point, I say that all of that is abusive. One of the other things we're going to talk about, I've talked about a little bit, is power and control, right? So when we talk about abuse, when we talk about unhealthy behaviors, you know, people will say a lot of things. They will say, oh, you know, I didn't know what I was doing. I was drunk. Or, oh, you know, I got too high. I didn't realize. Or it can be like, oh, well, this is all I know. This is all I know how to do. But really, when we get down to it, it's about power and control. It's about that person being able to have power over their partner, to control their partner's choices and decisions. And when they're not able to do that is when these behaviors come out. So if they can keep you in line and they can control what you say and everything's going their way, some of the stuff might not happen, right? But when you start advocating for yourself, or you're doing things that maybe they do feel insecure about, or maybe they feel like they're not good enough. They feel like they're losing some power. They feel like they're losing control. And then that will start kicking up some of these behaviors. And then our last term is intimate partner violence. So when I say intimate partner violence, it really covers a lot of things, right? It can be verbal abuse, it can be sexual abuse, it can be physical abuse. We'll talk about financial abuse and how that works, how money kind of can play a role in abusive behaviors. And really teen dating violence, when I talk about teen dating violence, it's really just about age, right? So intimate partner violence and teen dating violence are very similar, but teen dating violence is specific to teenagers. So as you get older and you're in adult relationships and these relationships become unhealthy, then they kind of go into this category of intimate partner violence. And the reason I use intimate partner violence and not domestic violence is really to be inclusive, right? So when we look at domestic violence, a lot of the times domestic violence is kind of thought of as, a man and woman, and there's physical violence, right? So I use intimate partner violence because it does include sexual violence, right? So we start talking about sexual abuse and rape, sexual assault. That's included in intimate partner violence, because you can be with someone who's just a hookup and still be experiencing an unhealthy relationship or a violent relationship. And also it doesn't, violence doesn't have a gender, right? So when we start talking about LGBTQ relationships, we're going to talk about a high prevalence rate for violence in some of those relationships, in different situations, and how different people in more at-risk populations experience violence at a higher rate. So those are all things that are true and they happen, and that's why I use intimate partner violence more so than saying domestic violence. So why talk about this, right? This is a little heavy. So why are we going to talk about healthy and unhealthy relationships? So really, it's common. It's really common. So almost nearly 1.5 million high school students nationwide experience physical abuse from a dating partner. That's not including the controlling behaviors over the phone. That's not including any of the emotional abuse. 1.5 million high school students have experienced physical abuse from a dating partner. So in Wisconsin, 1 in 5 teens will experience dating violence based on the statistics that we have. And I would like to make an argument and say that that's higher because some youth don't know what dating violence is and they don't report, right? So then 1 in 4 teens in Wisconsin say that they've been called names, harassed, put down by their partner, both in person and through mobile devices or social media. So we will be talking about social media and how social media plays a role in all these unhealthy behaviors and how they kind of come out in social media, because it is a little bit different, right? And then 2 in 3 teens who were in an abusive relationship never told anybody about it. So those statistics really could be higher, and we could be looking more at 2 or 3 out of 5 youth are experiencing abusive relationships. And the reason why we talk about it is because it has long-lasting effects. So not only is it really common, but the effects last the rest of your life, right? So violent relationships in adolescence puts victims at a higher risk later on for substance abuse, various mental health issues, and domestic violence in further relationships. So kind of that cycle of violence I talked about earlier. If you're as a teen and you're dating and your relationships while you're dating as a teen are violent, the likelihood that your relationships as adults are violent gets higher. 50% of youth who report being victims of dating violence and sexual assault attempt suicide. So that's a huge number, right? Half of the teens who report being victims of dating violence, intimate partner violence, attempt suicide. And those that do experience intimate partner violence, as intimate partner violence is kind of grouped into this trauma category, they actually have shorter lifespans on average. They have higher rates of diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and cancer. So these effects that you have in your relationship don't just affect you emotionally, they affect you physically. And those effects last a very long time, or they can, if not dealt with, or if those situations happen over and over again. And like I talked about in my first video, children who grow up in homes witnessing violence are more likely to engage in violent relationships in adulthood. So as these relationships that you're in turn into adult relationships and you start becoming a parent, the kids see these relationships and then they go on to have the same type of relationship, because we're modeling for them. We're showing them what they should be doing. So that's my definitions and why talking about this is important. So feel free to click the link at the bottom with questions or any topic suggestions that you have. Please like and subscribe to the channel for all kinds of youth-centered content, from some of my other peers as well, doing content on mindfulness and various exercises that you can do. There's some funny stuff on there, I promise. We're working on all that sort of thing. Also, one of my peers is doing college stuff, so college readiness, all of which I think will be super cool for you guys. And remember, put some respect on your relationship.